Hello, and welcome to this evening's author reading and discussion with David Adams Richards. I'm Rick Sickinger, Programming Chair for the Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story. When I'm not doing this, my day job is as Tourism Development Officer for the County of Huron, where I have the pleasure of promoting Huron County as a great visitor destination. The Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story, now in its 19th year, celebrates short stories and Canadian writers in the landscape that has inspired Alice Munro. Earlier today, we held the Alice Munro Festival for Kids, which saw children's authors read and speak to over 1,000 children in our local schools. Thanks to festival committee members Colleen Shank and Karen Stewart for coordinating that this year. A special thank you to all 10 people on the organizing committee who helped put the festival together. You can find out more about the festival by following us on Facebook or checking out our website, alicemunrofestival.ca. We would like to start this evening's event by acknowledging that Huron County, the land where we are coming to you from, is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral peoples. We recognize the First Peoples' continued stewardship of the land and water, and that this territory was subject to the dish with one spoon wampum, under which multiple nations agreed to care for the land and resources by the Great Lakes in peace. We would also like to acknowledge and recognize the Upper Canada Treaty signed in regards to this land, which include Treaty Number 29 and Treaty Number 45.5, and our roles as treaty people committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation, gratitude, and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. Our thoughts lie with everyone impacted by the tragic news that emerged over the past week regarding the former Kamloops residential school. I would now like to turn it over to the moderator for this evening's event, Marion Doucette. Marion fell in love with books and reading at age 4 when she got her first library card at the Clinton Library. Years later, working as a page at the same library, she met her first real author, Alice Munro. Since then, Marion has enjoyed meeting many authors while working for the Huron County Library and many playwrights through her longtime association with the Blythe Festival. She has co-edited the anthology 7 Short Plays from Theatre Ontario with Skip Shand and currently enjoys working as online communications coordinator for Huron-Perth Public Health. Enjoy this evening's event.
Great, thank you, Rick. This evening, I get the pleasure to be chatting with author David Adams Richards. David Adams Richards decided to be a writer at 14, and it has been his vocation ever since. He grew up in a small town on New Brunswick's Miramichi River, and for much of his literary career, his work has focused on the Miramichi and its inhabitants. He has received numerous awards, including being one of the few writers in the history of the Governor General's Literary Awards to win both in the fiction category for Nights Below Station Street, the first novel of his acclaimed Miramishi Trilogy, and as well in the nonfiction category for Lines on the Water, his memoir about fly fishing. In 2000, David became one of the only authors to co-win the prestigious Giller Prize for his novel Mercy Among the Children. The other author with whom he shared this prize was Michael Ondaatje, another author who, like this festival's namesake, has regional ties to Huron County with his famous poem, The Concessions, and the Clinton special, Ondaatje's film about the farm show. Connections to the region of Miramichi and the rural lives of its inhabitants is central to David Adams Richards' fiction. Perhaps it is this quality that gives his writing a universal appeal. For every character he writes about is someone you might know in your own community, no matter where you live. In 2017, he was appointed to represent the province of New Brunswick in the Senate of Canada. And last year, he was slated to be a part of this festival, but his participation was sidelined by the COVID pandemic. This delay in having him attend has been well worth the wait, because we're delighted to welcome you, David, to start off this year's festival and to introduce us to your new novel, Darkness, which was published just 2 weeks ago. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much. I'm a novelist and not a short story writer, which puts me in a bit of a strange position at a short story festival. I've written a book of short stories, and I wrote one good story after that, but mainly when I start to write fiction, it does manage to be a little longer, and certainly none of my short stories are the quality of Alice Munro's. But my novels are centered, as you explained, mainly on the Miramichi, although my characters do travel. So I'm going to read a bit about Orville, and I can only read about 5 or 10 minutes, so you're only going to get a part of this. Now, when Orville was young, he had a tumor in his eye, and this was dealt with years ago in a book called Blood Ties. And so he has a blindness in one eye, and he wears a patch, and his face is disfigured because of that. He's also a brilliant young man. And when he reaches high school, he sees this beautiful young woman, and he thinks, if she can be my friend, my girlfriend, then I'll be beautiful too. This is how he thinks. I need a beautiful girl so I can be as beautiful as well. And he realizes after it's all over that he has mistaken what beauty is. But I'll read just a part of this, and then we can talk about Montreal and how they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs if you want. I mean, that'd be fine by me. And the thing about this novel is John Delno, one of my major characters throughout my fiction, is explaining this Orville's life to Orville's sister, who has come back to New Brunswick to try to find out why Orville died such a tragic death. So the whole novel is a narrative of John telling Kathy about Orville's life, reacquainting her with it. One day when Orville was in high school, he met a girl named Brenda. She sat 2 rows over and 1 seat down in class. She was a girl from town. He was struck by her like some terrible affliction. He could not look at her without awe. He wondered if he would ever be able to speak to her. What could he ever say to her? How could he convince her that his beauty was inside him? After some weeks, he started to hitchhike the 20 miles just to see her on Saturdays. Not to speak to her, just to see her walking by with other girls on some errand of some importance, the warm drafts from store doors opening and dissipating in the cold white air. He always had some money in his pocket in case she wanted a Coca-Cola. He tried to hide from himself how he actually looked to others. Did she notice him? And what might she think if she did? He came around the corner by Henry Street late one afternoon and felt the fleeting swish of her shoulder by accident and was amazed that they had actually touched, but it was just her coat's shoulder pad. And when he got the courage, he began to ask her to let him take her to a dance with notes he put into her locker. This girl was going to be his girlfriend, you see, his savior. He would have a girlfriend too. That was it. He waited for her in the after-school hours and missed the bus to see her walk down the long lane to the bottom of town. Then after dark, he would make his way home alone, walking along the broken road leading out of our town. And on those long journeys, he would think that he too would have a girl and she would be pretty to offset who he was, or that he was not pretty. To him, girls were kinder and more forgiving than boys, and he believed in her as something like a savior, I think. She would forgive his look and see into his soul. He believed then that women would save our world. That is why his disputes with women later become such an anomaly and so harsh, or I should say disputes with certain women. At any rate, he believed that Brenda's beauty was of the good kind, the kind that could save the world. Later, he would write an essay on the kind of beauty that would save the world, but it had to be the right kind of beauty. When I read that essay, things become much clearer about his visiting the monastery in Rogersville all those years ago. But I don't think she was as interested in how he thought as he speculated she would be in private. Still, he continued to ask her out through these notes, and to her credit, she did say yes. She did respond to these notes, you see. She said yes, and it too was written in a note and placed in his locker with "Yes, I will" encircled by a small heart. Later, he was to find out that the note was placed in his locker by other girls whom she had told and who played a trick on her. But still, when she found this out, she said yes to him. The problem was she had to sanction it with her boyfriend, a boy named Junior Barker from Derby. You might remember Barker's construction. He was the son. Yet Orville did not know this was a factor in her acceptance, and that she was simply honoring a trick played upon her. Junior Barker, of course, was furious over this trick, and he planned to go to the dance to chaperone from a distance. He was furious because it was shameful for his girl to be thought of as dating material by someone as deformed as your brother, Kathy. He was also furious that she had accepted. People would make fun. Certainly they would make fun of him if he did not take charge. Orville worried for days how he would speak to her, how he would walk her home, what money he might have on him to do so. But she was incredibly nice, met him at the door of her small house on George Street, introduced him to her parents, all the things young ladies with still budding bodies are supposed to do in these circumstances, and away they went, he more loftily anticipatory than she, to that sour, terrible little dance long ago. At first it was fine. I mean, that dance where the boys were trying to grow their hair long, toking outside behind the brick wall, being wise and blameless about drugs, with their thin chests and thin open shirts, wearing the beetle boots that were the style, the gold-colored bell-bottom pants of days long ago. All was fine until Orville went to get a Coke for her, and on the way back he tripped over someone's feet. Were the feet put there on purpose by Junior Barker? Orville fell and spilled the drink over his new shirt. Brenda, sitting 2 tables away, pretended for his sake that she did not see, but she had seen. She flushed crimson against her soft, curly black hair. 2 boys helped Orville to his feet. The cruel gesture was replaced by a moment of kindness, as so much in life is, but Orville was humiliated, though he tried to laugh it away. So then at that dance in our small high school auditorium, where so much hope and pain still is remembered, so it is as if the walls themselves could tell secrets of adolescent agony from 1950 onward, and all the agony competed with each other. Junior Barker asked her, his girl, to dance. This was when Orville had gone to the washroom to wipe his shirt. It was the nature of her youth to be on thinking. She jumped up as if on fire to get herself away from him into the center of the floor. But she did not come back to Orville's table. She danced with Junior again. She held his hand and walked back to his table. Orville sat watching them, his shirt stained with coke, his new tie looking ridiculous, for he'd been the only student to wear one. The candle burning for no one but himself, and the crepe paper echoing in its crinkled shapes of final whimsical banality. I suppose this is what the beauty he had put his faith in had become.
Thank you, David. You really brought Orville to life, and I'm sure for many of our viewers, you brought back those poignant feelings of high school dances, you know, and first love, and yeah, we're reliving it. Thank you.
Right.
That was great. That could have happened anywhere in Canada, not just in the Miramichi. And
Right.
I think my first question for you tonight is, when people talk about your writing, there's often reference to the Miramishi Trilogy. And while most of your novels are set in the Miramichi region, and quite often they share characters, which we have been introduced to Orville before, even Darkness has been cited as described as the last in a Miramichi Trilogy, but it's not the real Miramichi Trilogy, because I understand that's Nights Before Station Street, Evening Snow Will Bring Such Peace, and For Those Who Hunt the Wounded Down. So I want to know, how do you address the confusion, especially to new readers of your work, in this Miramichi Trilogy? Or is there really just a Miramichi Trilogy of 3?
I didn't make the idea up of a trilogy. That was made up by other people. But really, I've written 18 published novels, or 19. So, I mean, I've written really in sections of 3 all my life about certain characters and certain issues that I'm fundamentally interested in at the time. So really, I've written 2 or 3 or maybe 4 trilogies. The first one was really The Coming of Winter, which I wrote when I was a boy of 21, young man, and then Blood Ties, which deals with Orville and Kathy's family. And then Lives of Short Duration, which deals with social and spiritual destruction of the Miramichi in the 1980s. And all of those were kind of together in a way. They focused on situations that came out of the same milieu. And then came this trilogy that is the most well-known, The Nights Below Station Street and Evening Snow Will Bring Such Peace and For Those Who Hunt the Wounded Down. But then I've written other, in sections of 3 trilogies, I would say. And so Principles to Live By and Mary Cyr and Darkness really is a trilogy, because it focuses on, well, what it focuses on in many ways is the mimicking of concern that destroys the scapegoat. And Orville in this is extremely brilliant and extremely solitary, and because of very many different situations in his life, he becomes looked upon as an oddity and a dangerous man and a bigot. And he never answers these crimes, and he's not one of them. He's nothing like this. But it takes you the whole novel to figure out why this is happening. And why it is happening is because really what happened in his youth is what he was so shunned because of his point of departure in his life with the tumor in his face, that he felt uncomfortable with people most of his life. And so he becomes an easy target. And I've always wrestled with the fact of mimicry of the mob scapegoating people. And of course, great writers have written about this, but I've written about it too. So that's in a nutshell what I've been writing in the last 5 or 6 years.
That's great. Thank you so much for clearing that up for me. And I look forward to reading more and more of the Miramichi trilogies. Another aspect that I discovered, especially in Darkness, and that is that the role that culture plays. And by culture, I don't really mean regional culture, but the arts. Throughout Darkness, you tend to make fleeting references to different writers and visual artists, all from the Maritimes. And that's especially so when you're talking about the knowledge or prestige or status that's associated with Professor Milton Vale. You make reference to Alden Nolan, one of the original voices of New Brunswick as a poet, novelist, and playwright. You also there's a reference to Milton Acorn, one of my favorite poets, who his work has a deep power drawn from images of everyday life. And then you also reference the visual arts, Molly Bobeck, which I'm sure many people don't realize how important she was as the first Canadian woman artist to be sent overseas to document Canada's World War effort, and of course the well-known Maud Lewis. I'm wondering, is there a reason of why I don't want to say dropped, but it feels like you've dropped these names of regional artists throughout the work. Is it a deliberate effort to make your readers aware of the New Brunswick or Maritime regional artistic culture, or is it a reflection of your own interest?
Well, I think it's all of that. I think it's all of that. I mean, I knew Molly Boat back for years. I thought she was a saint. I mean, I thought she was really a sainted lady. And I knew her husband Bruno, and I was friends with Alden, and I knew Milton, and I mean, I knew them all, and they are faces of our land, and they are important faces. But you see, that's not the only reason I use them. I use them to show the importance people put in them for prestige, and who mentioned them, and why they mention them for prestige. And throughout this novel, there's a contest between the two beauties. And the contest is between the beauty that people seek every day and the beauty of the soul of people like little Gabby May Crump, who is the one that Orville goes searching for throughout the novel, that little girl he tried to protect. And they thought he was a molester because he was trying to protect this little girl. And you know why they would think this. I mean, here's this huge lumbering man with a scarred face and this child. Well, of course he's taking advantage of her. And so there's nothing more mimicking than the mob. But in doing that, he loses the only profound moment of beauty he sees in the world, which is this little girl, the soul of this little girl. And all around the novel, there are other aspects of beauty in painting and art, and he becomes a famed archaeologist. And he searches all over the world for beauty, for statues of gold and for whatever. And in the end, he comes back to try to find the one part of beauty that he has lost, and that's the beauty of the little Gabby May Crump. And he spends the last of his life looking for her. You see, one of the greatest lines ever written was written by Dostoevsky and the brothers Karamazov. And he said, beauty will save the world. But he also said, Christ and the devil fight for the souls of man, and the weapon they use is beauty. And how can Christ and the devil use the same weapon? Well, they do, but they're very different kinds of beauty. And this is what Orville begins to notice at the end of toward the end of the novel, that he was searching for beauty to bring it home to Brenda to prove he was beautiful. And he was searching for it in all the wrong places, even though he became famous doing it. That the one beauty that he was searching for was the beauty of that little girl, Gabby May Crump, who perhaps was the only person to really love him. That was the beauty. And so, I mean, there's all kinds of different facets in this novel toward that, but that's one of the facets I was dealing with. So yeah, there's beauty in poetry, and there's beauty in art, and there's beauty in a lot of things, but there's no greater beauty than the beauty of the human soul. And this is what Orville finally discovers. It takes him a long time, but he finally discovers it.
That's wonderful. And it certainly opens my eyes to revisiting the novel again. One thing about Darkness is we follow the narration of the RCMP officer John Delno, and I understand he did feature in your first novel, Blood Ties, which you wrote when you were 23. And he's been a figure in at least 10 other novels. And I would like to know, what is it about John Delno that has made you decide to make him the narrator of this novel? And what is it about RCMP officers that keep you coming back to them? Is there a Mountie somewhere in your past who served for inspiration for this character?
No, and I pronounce it Delno.
Okay.
Okay, but two Delno men died. They were firefighters when I was 7 years old. Both had large families. And one of the brothers was in fighting a fire against the wall of the building, and he got in trouble, and the other brother rushed in to rescue him, and the wall collapsed, and they both died. It was very tragic. And when I used John Delno, I was thinking of the importance of courage. And I wrote him in my first novel, which was The Coming of Winter, when I was 21. And you're correct, in my second novel, Blood Ties, when I was 23. And then he appears again a little bit in Lives of Short Duration, but he's kind of a guy at loose ends with nothing going on in his life, and not a very nice fellow. But I realized there was much more to him than that. And there's a book written about my association with John Delno and the aspects of love in my novels, and John Delno becoming a greater and greater human being as he learns to love more. And one of my people I was reading in Montreal a couple of years ago, and one of the people there asked me, when would I be finished writing? And another spoke up that I'd probably be finished with writing when I was finished with John Delno, because he has become one of the masterful characters in my fiction. And I might be finished with him pretty soon, but anyway, he's still around, and he's a much different man now, a much gentler and wiser human being than he was when he was a young man. But there was a lot of fire in his belly when he was a young man that I admired. The thing about RCMP is I come from a family of law officers. 3 of my cousins are RCMP. I have undercover detective first cousin who lives in Australia. I had an FBI agent who lived in Boston who was a cousin. My brother, my sister's a judge, and my brother's an attorney. So I don't know what happened to me, but anyway, they've always fascinated me for good and for bad. I mean, they're not all great. I met RCMP officers and others who aren't, but I met most who just try to do their duty the best they can, and have a very difficult job to contend with. So yeah, they do inspire me.
That's great, and I'm glad you've got all those ties in your family, and that you have the craft and the ability to capture that and share it with all of us. And I'm glad to know that John Delno might feature in a future novel. I keep wondering if I know that Kathy was in love with him in an earlier novel, and who knows, maybe they'll eventually get together.
Well, the idea was when I first thought of this novel. Years ago, I first started bringing them back together because they had such a terrible relationship, because he was very immature, and he wasn't, as he said in this novel, if only I was as brave then as I am now, things would have turned out differently. But he was a kid, and he treated her rather badly. So I figured this is a novel they would get back together. And it didn't happen, because the novel takes over. Of course, the very parts of the novel, the very characters of the novel create their own story. And so they didn't get back together, but in a way you realize they still loved each other quite a bit. And of course, this scenario starts after Delno has died, and Kathy has come back in order to talk about him at a symposium in Beaverbrook House in Newcastle. So they won't get back together, but they did love each other and left on a good note.
That's good. At this point, I'm going to remind our viewers who are joining us by Zoom that they are invited to submit questions. We haven't had any come through at the moment, but please feel free to ask some questions if you like, that I can then in turn ask David. David, I'm really curious because Darkness is almost like a novel within a novel, because you write about a book that has, and they both share the same title. Is that conscious, or are you playing with your reader?
Well, a bit of both. It's a little bit of both. I mean, I tried to name the book, the actual book that I wrote, something else, but nothing else fit, and so I left it as it was because it implies the very book that causes the tragedy actually causes the tragedy to little Gabby May and others, and so therefore I left it as it was, and my publisher and my editor wanted me to leave it as it was, and so I did. Yeah, but it is about a Miramichi writer who writes a book about the family, the Gabby May Crump's family and Orville's family, and about the sacrifices of ordinary human beings. And if people read it, they'll know what happens to this book, and it causes a conflagration against these people that actually happens, and it's a rather tragic, I know, and that's what they say I write, tragedy. So I guess I am too old to stop now, but it causes a tragedy in these characters' lives, yeah, and the Miramichi writer who wrote it only meant to exhibit the kindness and love of these people, and it created another crisis in everyone's life.
We have one interesting question, and it is about darkness. And it's from Kelsey. Could a new reader read Darkness and fully enjoy it without reading your other books? Or do you recommend reading others first? I know that you will enjoy reading it, but I'd love to hear David's answer.
Well, there are small synopsises to other books that if you know my work will come through. For instance, Kathy and John had a rather fevered relationship when they were kids of 18 and 19 in the book called Blood Ties. And Orville was a very young kid. When Blood Ties ends, I pick up Darkness when Orville goes off to high school as a young kid, 2 years younger than the other students because of how bright he is. And then he gets involved with this girl, Brenda, who he thinks is going to save him because he's so conscious of his face. The thing about it is, I think you can read Darkness, but I would suggest you buy all my other books. but you know, the only book that would really show what was going on earlier would be, of course, Blood Ties, and I think it's a worthwhile book, but it's a very young book. It's a different book than Darkness is.
We have a question from Yvonne. Do you have a favorite novel that you've written, and what other authors do you like to read? And I'm sure you get asked the latter question a lot.
Yeah, and I get asked because I've written 18 or 19 novels, that question too, and I'm not really sure. Every day it might be different, but for I think Mercy Among the Children that I wrote, that I co-won the Giller with, is my favorite book. I have others that I like. I like Principles to Live By, which deals with John Delno in Rwanda, which is not a great place to be during the genocide, and how it affected his life terribly. However, I think Mercy Among the Children might be my favorite book, but I like my earlier books too. I like Blood Ties. I wrote it when I was 23. It was influenced, the first part of it was influenced a bit by William Faulkner. But I still think it's, I think it's certainly entirely my own. And it's about family life, and it's about family love. So I think it's quite a good book. I have a lot of writers I admire, a lot of Canadian writers I admire. The short story writer Alice Munro, I don't know if you've heard of her. I like her work very much. I like the poetry of Nolan and the short stories of Alistair MacLeod. I think Alistair MacLeod is also one of our great short story writers. I love Nolan's poetry, and I like Milton Acorn's poetry. There's a lot, but you know, I love Dostoevsky and I love Tolstoy, and I've been compared to both. I certainly don't come up to their standards as a writer, but I'm glad that people people say that I'm doing within the moral sanctions of life. I'm trying to do the same kind of thing, so that's nice. But I love Chekhov, and I like Flannery O'Connor a lot, and she's being blasted now, and she's being banned. Everything is being banned now. You know, Faulkner's banned. Huckleberry Finn, I fought for a number of months to keep it on school curriculum back when I was a kid of 25, and it was taken off. And it has so much humanity and love for humanity in it. So, I mean, there's nothing you can say. I mean, if books like that go, what's going to happen to it? But anyway, I love those writers, and I recommend them if you haven't read them.
Connie asks, I'm intrigued by your examination of the development of character. In your novels, do you start from, is this a foundation? Is beginning from that as a foundation leads to your examination of the character?
I'm not sure I understand completely the question, but I will answer it the way I think I can. Characters are everything in my work. The character creates the work, and if the characters are good enough, if they're good enough characters, they control the novel. Tolstoy said about Count Levin when he was writing Anna Karenina, he would say to his wife, I wonder what Levin's going to do today. Because he didn't know what Levin was going to do, because Levin had taken over so much of the novel. Great characters breathe life into your novel as you breathe life into the character. So I didn't know, for instance, how John and Kathy would react within the confines of this novel. But they told me how they would react as I was writing it. And I'd say, of course, this is what would happen. Or how Orville would act this way. Of course, he would do this. I did that with, of course, Lyle and Autumn in Mercy Among the Children. Of course, Autumn, a brilliant young girl, poverty-stricken. Of course, she was, and her family being tormented. Of course, she would act like that. She takes over part of the novel. So the characters, if they're good enough, take over the novel, and you go along with them. I know it sounds schizophrenic, but it's not.
No, I don't think. No, it's not schizophrenic at all. It's kind of like discovering new friends, and you ebb and flow through life. Yeah. You know, dependent upon the people that are around you. Someone also is curious about how you deal with the concept of truth.
Of what?
Of truth.
Of truth?
Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid I can't help you. That's all that I've been given.
You see, the whole importance of knowing right and wrong is based on personal integrity, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you are. People say, oh, the truth differs in different places or whatever, or some people have this idea about truth or that idea about truth. But let me give you an example. Bearing false witness is wrong in New Brunswick. And we know it's wrong in Toronto. And we know it's wrong in England. And people in China know it's wrong. And people in Miramichi know it's wrong. And people in Australia know it's wrong. Bearing false witness is wrong. We know that. We know there's a truth to that. We know there's a truth to that. We know that harming someone innocent is wrong. We know that here. We know it in New Brunswick. We know it in Australia. So there are certain definable ideas of right and wrong that produce our idea of truth. And if we follow those with our own personal integrity, which is all we have to stand on, and no one can take away our personal integrity, we can give it away, but no one can take it away from us, then I think we'll make out all right. We're all going to fail at certain times, and my characters certainly do. But still, that's what we have to base our life on. So that's about the only way I can answer it, I think.
And I think you've answered it absolutely perfect, because our viewer got back to us and said that you're right on exactly her intentions in the question. I've got two more for you. One is scapegoating. It's a major theme in your novels, including Mercy Among the Children, Mary Cyr, and also Darkness. Could you say something about how you feel the variations of scapegoating differ from novel to novel?
I'm not really sure how they do. I will say that I follow the edict of Lord Byron, and I wrote about scapegoating long before I read this. But Lord Byron said, "I wish men to be as free from mobs as from kings," and he said that because both have an interest in creating malice for others, and the mob is a very dangerous thing, because a mob, as René Girard said, the mob is based their entire lives within the construct of the mob on mimicry, and that's what scapegoating is about. It's about the mimicry of the mob against the victim. And although I have different peculiarities within my novels in addressing it, it still comes down to the hilarity of the mob against the individual who stands alone. And that's a difficult thing to address, because it happens everywhere. I'm quite interested in this novel of how the intellectual and the academics take over concern for First Nations that they don't feel. That Orville McDermott feels very deeply about the scars of the First Nations, and yet he's the one that is signaled out as a bigot. And Eunice Wise, who's just come onto the ground as a new champion of the First Nations, doesn't have a clue about them. And but she has joined the mimicry of the mob in order to get satisfaction and emotional delight out of this. That's a very dangerous thing, because not only doesn't it help, but what it does, it sometimes traumatizes the actual people like Orville McDermott and others who actually do know and do want to help. And so this is a problem in our society that I try to confront in my novels, for better or for worse. And it's not only academics and intellectuals. I mean, it's a lot of different people. But in this novel, that's what I was dealing with.
And you do it beautifully. Watching Eunice change throughout the novel, and change sides is very revealing.
If you ever read War and Peace, and watched people like Prince Vasily and Anna Schreier completely and duplicitously change their minds at every whim and fancy going on in Moscow, then you'll get the idea of how these people can destroy lives long before they destroy each other.
Right. Our last question is from Donald, and it ties along with one that we had before we started this the live conversation tonight, and that is: do you feel that your experience as a senator has informed your writing, and if so, how? And I had asked you, will your work as a senator eventually be reflected in your writing? So, can you share?
Yeah, because I'm not sure if I will write much about the Senate. I think I'll write a scene or two in my new novel. Maybe that'll be as far as it goes. The Senate has I'll put it this way. I've written consistently since I was 19 years old and published my first short story. My mind, for better or for worse, I'm 70 years old. My mind is pretty well made up. So I don't know how it'll affect my work or my outlook, but I'll tell you what it has done. It has shown me a valuable insight into the workings of the Canadian Parliament and the Senate, and that most senators, well, I would say all of them, but certainly most of them, if not all of them, care deeply for Canada, care deeply for our country, and want the best for it. And I admire many of them, and some of them are extremely bright people. And I know that legislation doesn't get passed in time, and I know that it gets debated ad nauseum. I know all that, and that's how Parliament works, and it'll continue to work like that. But the people there, not only for the most part, almost all are trying their very best for Canada, and I do admire them. I didn't know what the Senate was about before I got there, and I do have a great deal of respect for the people there now, and for the security who take care of us, and for the staff workers who keep the place, and for the clerks. All of them deserve a great amount of respect.
And you deserve a great amount of respect for so eloquently and being a champion of the Miramichi and the people of New Brunswick and representing them so well in Senate. David, I want to thank you for being with us this evening and helping us launch the 19th annual Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story. And I want to say congratulations again on Darkness. Was a great read. It's been delightful talking with you this evening, and we're happy that this year you finally were able to join us and also to introduce us to Darkness. And I would like to remind our viewers that copies of Darkness can be ordered through the Village Bookshop at villagebookshop.ca, or there are also copies available for those of you residing in Huron County through the Huron County Library. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, County of Huron, Township of North Huron, the Ontario Arts Council, Dr. Marie Gear, Royal Homes, Capital Power, and also State and Home Hardware, Micro-Age Basics, Hurontel, and countless others who are now on the screen for you to view. All of you, your generosity has helped immensely in making this festival a reality for so many. I also like to say thank you to the staff here at Faux Pas Media that are working behind the scenes in the studio. You've been fabulous in making me comfortable and making sure that we had a great connection with David and also with Rick Sickinger.
I'll say goodbye now, and I'll say goodbye now, and thank everyone, and have a great festival. And if you see Alice, say hello to her for me.
We will.
Bye-bye.
We will for sure. Thank you, David. Finally, I wish to thank you, our participants, for joining us tonight. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to invite you to join us again next year for the 20th Alice Munro Festival of the Short Story. It will take place the first weekend in June of 2022, and fingers crossed that we get to see each other in person. So until then, stay safe, stay happy, and keep reading.